Maria, a mother from Colombia, came to the United States seeking a better life for her two young children. She worked tirelessly at a local factory, always eager to put in extra hours to provide for her family. Her days were long, filled with hard work and dreams of a brighter future for her kids. But life wasn't always easy. At the factory, Maria faced unfair treatment. She was given the hardest tasks, denied promotions, and often spoken to disrespectfully by her supervisor. This discrimination made her feel small and unimportant, but she knew she had to stay strong for her children. Despite the challenges, Maria never gave up hope. She believed in fairness and justice. After months of enduring the unfair treatment, she decided to take a brave step. With the help of a lawyer, she filed a lawsuit against the factory for workplace discrimination. It was a daunting decision, filled with uncertainty, but she knew it was the right thing to do, not just for herself, but for other women who might be facing similar situations. Her case was about to become much bigger than just her own struggle. The lawsuit was a long and difficult process. Maria had to gather evidence, find witnesses, and relive the painful experiences she had endured at the factory. There were days when she felt like giving up, when the stress and uncertainty became too much to bear. One instance that stood out was when she was passed over for a promotion she deserved. A less experienced colleague, who wasn't even as qualified, received the position. When Maria asked her supervisor why, she was told, "This job requires someone with different qualities." Maria knew what he meant. It was because she was a woman and because she was an immigrant. Another time, she was assigned to clean up a spill of dangerous chemicals without proper safety equipment. When she protested, her supervisor dismissed her concerns, saying, "Just get it done. It's not that bad." Maria felt her health and safety were being ignored, simply because she was seen as disposable. These experiences, and many others, fueled her determination to fight back. She knew that what was happening to her was wrong, and she wanted to make sure it didn't happen to anyone else. With the support of her lawyer, she prepared herself for the battle ahead, determined to seek justice and hold the factory accountable for its discriminatory practices. After months of legal battles, the day finally arrived for the verdict. Maria sat in the courtroom, her heart pounding in her chest. She looked at her lawyer, who offered a reassuring smile. She glanced back at her children, who were sitting in the front row, their eyes filled with hope. The judge entered the room, and a hush fell over the courtroom. He began to read the verdict, his voice echoing through the silent space. Maria held her breath, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Maria Rodriguez. A wave of relief washed over Maria. Tears streamed down her face as she heard the words she had longed to hear for so long. She had won. The factory was found guilty of workplace discrimination. A cheer erupted from her supporters in the courtroom. Maria hugged her lawyer, thanking him for his unwavering support. She turned to her children, who ran to embrace her, their faces beaming with pride. The victory was more than just a legal win. It was a validation of her courage, her strength, and her unwavering belief in justice. It was a message to all those who had ever been discriminated against that they, too, could stand up and fight for their rights. Maria felt a sense of triumph, knowing that she had made a difference, not just for herself, but for countless others. The joy of victory was short-lived. Just 3 days later, as Maria was getting her children ready for school, there was a knock on the door. Her heart sank as she opened it to find 2 ICE officers standing there. "Maria Rodriguez," one of them asked, his voice stern. Maria nodded, her voice caught in her throat. "We have a warrant for your arrest," the officer said, holding up a document. "You are being detained for deportation proceedings." Maria's world turned upside down. She couldn't believe what was happening. Just days ago, she had won a major victory, and now she was being taken away from her children and her life in the United States. Her children started to cry, clinging to her legs, begging the officers not to take her. Maria tried to stay strong, but tears streamed down her face as she hugged her kids tightly. "It's going to be okay," she whispered to them, trying to reassure them. even though she didn't believe it herself. "I'll be back soon." The officers led her away, leaving her children sobbing in the doorway. Maria looked back at them, her heart breaking with each step. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew that she had to fight, not just for herself, but for her children who depended on her. The hope she felt after winning the case was replaced with fear and uncertainty. News of Maria's detainment spread quickly, and her lawyer, Sarah Jenkins, immediately suspected foul play. The timing was too coincidental. Sarah had been an immigration lawyer for many years, and she knew that ICE investigations could take months, even years. For them to arrive just days after Maria won her case seemed highly suspicious. "This looks like a clear case of retaliation," Sarah declared at a press conference. "We believe that Maria's employer contacted ICE after losing the lawsuit in an attempt to punish her for standing up for her rights." Sarah and her team began to investigate, looking for any evidence that could link the factory to Maria's detainment. They started by reviewing Maria's personnel file, looking for any unusual notes or comments. They also interviewed Maria's former colleagues, hoping to find someone who might have overheard something or witnessed suspicious activity. Meanwhile, Maria was being held in a detention center, separated from her children and unsure of what the future held. She felt lost and alone, but she refused to give up hope. She knew that Sarah was working hard to get her released, and she clung to the belief that justice would prevail. She had already fought one battle and won, and she was ready to fight again. This time, the stakes were even higher. The investigation started to uncover some disturbing details. Sarah's team discovered an email sent for the factory's HR manager to an unknown email address just hours after the court verdict. The email contained only one sentence: "The problem has been taken care of." While it didn't explicitly mention ICE or Maria, the timing was incredibly suspicious. They also found that Maria's supervisor had made several phone calls to a number that was later traced back to a known ICE informant. The calls were made in the days leading up to Maria's detainment. One of Maria's former colleagues, fearing for her own job security, agreed to speak anonymously. She told Sarah that she had overheard Maria's supervisor making disparaging remarks about immigrants and expressing his desire to get rid of Maria after she filed the lawsuit. "He was always saying that she was nothing but a troublemaker," the colleague said. "He said she should be grateful for the opportunity to work here and that she shouldn't be causing problems." The evidence was mounting, painting a clear picture of retaliation, but proving it definitively would be a challenge. The factory would likely deny any involvement, and ICE would claim that they were simply following standard procedures. Sarah knew she had an uphill battle ahead, but she was determined to fight for Maria and expose the truth. The factory, under increasing pressure, released a statement denying any involvement in Maria's detainment. "We are deeply saddened to hear about Ms. Rodriguez's situation," the statement read. "We respect the court's decision in her discrimination case, and we would never retaliate against an employee for exercising her legal rights. We are cooperating fully with any investigation into this matter." However, Sarah wasn't buying it. She knew that companies often used carefully crafted statements to protect their image while secretly engaging in unethical behavior. She decided to dig deeper, focusing on the factory's owner, Mr. Thompson. She discovered that Mr. Thompson had a history of making anti-immigrant statements in public forums. He had also donated large sums of money to organizations that advocated for stricter immigration enforcement. This information, while not directly linking him to Maria's detainment, suggested a possible motive. Furthermore, Sarah learned that the factory had been facing financial difficulties and that Maria's lawsuit had cost them a significant amount of money. Getting rid of Maria could be seen as a way to cut costs and send a message to other employees who might be considering legal action. The pieces were starting to fit together, but Sarah needed more concrete evidence to prove her case. The clock was ticking, and Maria's future hung in the balance. In an exclusive interview, Mr. Thompson addressed the allegations directly. He appeared calm and composed, but Sarah noticed a flicker of nervousness in his eyes. "These accusations are completely unfounded," he stated firmly. We had no involvement whatsoever in Ms. Rodriguez's detainment. We respect the law, and we would never do anything to violate it. When asked about the suspicious email and the phone calls to the ICE informant, Mr. Thompson offered a carefully rehearsed explanation. The email was simply a reference to a human resources matter that was being resolved, he claimed, and the phone calls were related to a background check we were conducting on a potential new employee. He also addressed his past anti-immigrant statements, claiming that his views had been misinterpreted. I believe in secure borders and responsible immigration policies, he said, but I also believe in treating everyone with fairness and respect. Ms. Rodriguez was a valued employee, and we wish her the best. As for the timing of the ICE detainment, Mr. Thompson suggested it was purely coincidental. ICE operates independently, he said. We have no control over their actions. It's unfortunate that this happened so soon after the court verdict, but I assure you, there is no connection. Despite his confident demeanor, Sarah remained unconvinced. She knew that Mr. Thompson was a skilled businessman who was adept at manipulating public perception. She was determined to uncover the truth, no matter how well hidden it might be. Maria's case highlighted a disturbing reality. The legal system often fails to protect immigrant workers from retaliation. Employers can exploit loopholes by reporting employees to ICE without facing direct legal consequences for workplace discrimination or retaliation. These loopholes stem from the fact that immigration enforcement is a federal matter, separate from state and local labor laws. This allows employers to use immigration status as a weapon, knowing that the threat of deportation can silence workers who speak out against unfair treatment. Many immigrant workers are afraid to report workplace abuses, such as wage theft, unsafe working conditions, or discrimination, for fear of being deported. This creates a climate of fear and exploitation, where employers can take advantage of vulnerable workers without being held accountable. Organizations that advocate for immigrant rights have long called for reforms to close these loopholes and protect immigrant workers from retaliation. They argue that stronger laws are needed to prevent employers from using immigration status as a tool to silence workers and suppress their rights. Maria's case became a rallying cry for these organizations, who saw it as a prime example of the systemic problems that plague the immigration system. They vowed to fight for justice for Maria and to work towards creating a more equitable and just society for all workers, regardless of their immigration status. This was about more than just one woman. It was about protecting the rights of an entire community. Maria's story quickly spread across the nation, igniting a firestorm of media coverage and public debate. News outlets from coast to coast ran stories about her case, highlighting the alleged retaliation and the legal loopholes that allowed it to happen. Social media platforms buzzed with outrage as people share Maria's story and call for justice. Hashtags like #JusticeForMaria and #ImmigrantRights trended for days, as people from all walks of life expressed their support for Maria and condemned the factory's alleged actions. Politicians also weighed in on the case, with some calling for investigations and legislative reforms. Several members of Congress issued statements condemning the alleged retaliation and vowing to protect immigrant workers from abuse. However, the political reactions were divided, reflecting the deep divisions in American society over immigration policy. Some politicians defended ICE's actions, arguing that they were simply enforcing the law. Others accused Maria of breaking the law and suggested that she should have followed proper immigration procedures. Despite the divided political opinions, the public outcry was overwhelmingly in support of Maria. People recognized the injustice of her situation and were moved by her courage and determination. Her case became a symbol of the broader struggle for immigrant rights and the fight against workplace abuse. The national conversation had begun, and Maria's story was at the center of it all. The hardest part of Maria's detainment was the impact it had on her children, Sophia and Mateo. Sophia, the elder at 10 years old, tried to be strong for her younger brother, but the fear in her eyes was undeniable. Mateo, only 7, constantly asked when his mother was coming home, his small voice filled with worry. Without Maria, the family struggled to make ends meet. Maria's sister, Isabella, stepped in to care for the children, but she had her own family to support and could only do so much. The community rallied around them, providing food, clothing, and emotional support, but the absence of their mother was deeply felt. Sophia started having nightmares, reliving the moment the ICE officers took her mother away. Mateo's grades began to slip as he struggled to focus in school, constantly distracted by thoughts of his mother. Isabella did her best to reassure them, telling them that Maria was a strong woman and that she would be back soon. But deep down, Isabella was worried. She knew that the immigration system was complex and unpredictable, and she feared that Maria might be deported. The uncertainty of the situation weighed heavily on the entire family. They missed Maria's laughter, her cooking, her comforting presence. They longed for the day when they would be reunited, but they knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult. The hope that had briefly shone after Maria's victory was now overshadowed by fear and uncertainty. Maria faced a complex and daunting legal battle to avoid deportation. The first step was to challenge the legality of her detainment, arguing that it was retaliatory and therefore unlawful. Sarah and her team prepared a motion to have Maria released from detention, arguing that the evidence strongly suggested that the factory had tipped off ICE. They also explored other legal avenues to prevent Maria's deportation. One option was to seek asylum, arguing that she faced persecution in Colombia. However, this was a difficult path, as she would need to prove a credible fear of persecution based on her race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group. Another possibility was to apply for a U visa, which is available to victims of certain crimes who cooperate with law enforcement. Sarah argued that Maria was a victim of workplace discrimination and retaliation, and that she had cooperated with the authorities by filing a lawsuit against the factory. However, the U visa process was lengthy and uncertain, and there was no guarantee that Maria would be approved. In the meantime, she remained in detention, facing the constant threat of deportation. The legal challenges were numerous and complex, but Sarah and her team were determined to fight for Maria's right to stay in the United States with her children. The battle was far from over, and the stakes were incredibly high. Despite the daunting legal challenges and the emotional toll of her detainment, Maria was not alone. Her community rallied around her, providing unwavering support and reminding her that she was not forgotten. Neighbors organized fundraisers to help cover her legal expenses and support her children. Local churches held prayer vigils, calling for her release and justice. Advocacy groups staged protests outside the factory and the ICE detention center, demanding an end to retaliation against immigrant workers. Maria's story resonated with other immigrants who had faced similar situations. Many shared their own experiences of workplace abuse and the fear of deportation. They saw Maria as a symbol of their struggle and were inspired by her courage to speak out. One woman, Elena, who had also been a victim of workplace discrimination, reached out to Maria's family to offer her support. "I know what Maria is going through," Elena said. "It's not easy, but she has to stay strong. We are all here for her." The outpouring of support gave Maria strength and hope. She knew that she was not just fighting for herself, but for all those who had been silenced by fear and exploitation. The community's love and solidarity reminded her that she was valued and that her struggle was not in vain. This collective support fueled her determination to continue fighting for justice, no matter the odds. Maria's case ignited a nationwide movement calling for legal reforms to protect immigrant workers. Advocacy groups, labor unions, and civil rights organizations joined forces to demand changes that would prevent employers from retaliating against immigrant employees. One key proposal was to create stronger protections against workplace discrimination and retaliation, regardless of immigration status. This would involve amending existing labor laws to explicitly prohibit employers from using immigration status as a basis for discrimination or retaliation. Another proposal was to increase penalties for employers who violate labor laws and retaliate against immigrant workers. This would send a clear message that such behavior would not be tolerated and would deter other employers from engaging in similar practices. Some lawmakers introduced legislation that would close the loopholes that allow employers to report immigrant workers to ICE without facing legal consequences. These bills would make it illegal for employers to contact ICE in retaliation for an employee's exercise of their labor rights. The calls for reform extended beyond the workplace. Many advocates also called for comprehensive immigration reform that would provide a pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants and create a more just and humane immigration system. Maria's case became a powerful symbol of the need for change, and it galvanized efforts to create a more equitable society for all. The fight for reform was just beginning, but the momentum was growing. Even within the walls of the detention center, Maria refused to be broken. Despite the uncertainty and the fear, she held onto her strength and her unwavering belief in justice. She spent her days reading legal documents, writing letters to her children, and encouraging other detainees to stay strong. She spoke with Sarah regularly, offering her insights and ideas for her defense. She refused to be a passive victim, determined to fight for her rights every step of the way. She knew that her case was about more than just her own fate. It was about sending a message to other immigrants that they, too, could stand up and fight for what was right. In her letters to Sophia and Mateo, Maria emphasized the importance of education, hard work, and perseverance. She told them that even though she was not with them, she was always thinking of them and that she would never give up on them. Remember, she wrote in one letter, always be brave, always be kind, and always believe in yourself. You are my strength, and I know that you will make me proud. Maria's resilience became an inspiration to those around her. She showed that even in the face of adversity, it was possible to maintain hope and to fight for a better future. Her determination served as a powerful reminder that justice, while often delayed, could ultimately prevail. She was a beacon of hope in a dark place. Maria's story is a powerful reminder of the challenges faced by immigrant workers in the United States. It highlights the pervasive issues of workplace discrimination, retaliation, and the exploitation of legal loopholes that allow employers to take advantage of vulnerable workers. Her case serves as a stark example of how the pursuit of justice can be met with unexpected and devastating consequences. Despite winning her discrimination lawsuit, Maria was targeted and detained, leaving her children heartbroken and her future uncertain. However, Maria's story is also one of courage, resilience, and community solidarity. It demonstrates the strength of the human spirit and the unwavering belief in justice that can inspire people to stand up against oppression, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Her case has sparked a national conversation about the need for legal reforms to protect immigrant workers and to create a more equitable and just society for all. It has galvanized advocacy groups, labor unions, and civil rights organizations to fight for changes that will prevent future abuses and ensure that all workers are treated with dignity and respect. But the fight is far from over. Maria's future remains uncertain, and many other immigrant workers continue to face similar challenges. So, we must ask ourselves, what can we do to ensure that Maria's story is not repeated? How can we create a society where all workers are protected from discrimination and retaliation, regardless of their immigration status? The answer lies in our collective action, our unwavering commitment to justice, and our willingness to stand up for what is right.